struggling mother, sold everything to send twin daughters to school years later. This happened. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The afternoon sun burned fiercely over the small, dusty town as Maria tied her twin daughters, Emily and Olivia, to her chest with a faded, worn scarf. The babies were barely a month old, their tiny cries weak from hunger. Maria hadn't eaten since the night before, and her breast milk was running dry. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and swallowed the lump in her throat. Her husband, Daniel, had left the house early that morning without saying a word. She had assumed he was looking for work, but deep down, a small voice whispered that something was wrong. Still, Maria clung to hope. She whispered to her babies, "Don't worry, my angels. Mama will find something for us today." The only person she could think of was Samantha, her best friend since childhood, someone who had once promised to stand by her through thick and thin. Samantha lived just 2 streets away. Adjusting the scarf carefully around her fragile babies, Maria walked slowly toward her friend's house, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and desperation. When she arrived, she knocked softly on the wooden door. No answer. She knocked again, still nothing. The door was unlocked, so she pushed it open gently and stepped inside, calling out, "Samantha?" That's when she heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter, but Daniel's unmistakable voice, playful and carefree, something she hadn't heard in months. Trembling, Maria crept closer. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. She peeked inside, and the sight shattered her world. There, on the bed, lay Daniel and Samantha, half-dressed, sharing a bottle of beer and pieces of grilled meat, laughing like mischievous teenagers. Samantha barely bothered to cover herself. Daniel looked up, irritated, not guilty. "What are you doing, barging in like a crazy woman?" he snapped. Maria's knees buckled, but she held her daughters tighter. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel, our daughters are hungry. I came here to ask for help." Daniel rolled his eyes. "You gave me girls, not sons." "What use are they to me?" Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, but she stood firm. She wasn't going to beg. She turned away from the betrayal, her babies crying against her chest, and stepped back into the scorching sun, her heart breaking, her spirit igniting. The afternoon sun burned fiercely over the small, dusty town as Maria tied her twin daughters, Emily and Olivia, to her chest with a faded, worn scarf. The babies were barely a month old, their tiny cries weak from hunger. Maria hadn't eaten since the night before, and her breast milk was running dry. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and swallowed the lump in her throat. Her husband, Daniel, had left the house early that morning without saying a word. She had assumed he was looking for work, but deep down, a small voice whispered that something was wrong. Still, Maria clung to hope. She whispered to her babies, "Don't worry, my angels. Mama will find something for us today." The only person she could think of was Samantha, her best friend since childhood, someone who had once promised to stand by her through thick and thin. Samantha lived just 2 streets away. Adjusting the scarf carefully around her fragile babies, Maria walked slowly toward her friend's house, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and desperation. When she arrived, she knocked softly on the wooden door. No answer. She knocked again, still nothing. The door was unlocked, so she pushed it open gently and stepped inside, calling out, "Samantha?" That's when she heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter, but Daniel's unmistakable voice, playful and carefree, something she hadn't heard in months. Trembling, Maria crept closer. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. She peeked inside, and the sight shattered her world. There, on the bed, lay Daniel and Samantha, half-dressed, sharing a bottle of beer and pieces of grilled meat, laughing like mischievous teenagers. Samantha barely bothered to cover herself. Daniel looked up, irritated, not guilty. "What are you doing barging in like a crazy woman?" he snapped. Maria's knees buckled, but she held her daughters tighter. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel, our daughters are hungry. I came here to ask for help." Daniel rolled his eyes. "You gave me girls, not sons. What use are they to me?" Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, but she stood firm. She wasn't going to beg. She turned away from the betrayal, her babies crying against her chest, and stepped back into the scorching sun, her heart breaking, her spirit igniting. From that moment on, she knew she was truly on her own. Maria felt a mix of exhaustion and determination as she watched Emily and Olivia play together in the small, dusty yard of their new home. It was a modest place, an abandoned building in the back of the market. There were no windows, no floors, just cement walls and the smell of mold lingering in the air. But it was their home, and for now, it was enough. The girls were safe, and that's all that mattered to Maria. Her days were filled with hard work, scrubbing floors, washing clothes, doing whatever it took to bring in a few dollars. But every moment was worth it. Emily and Olivia were growing stronger, smarter, more determined. They asked questions about the world, their eyes wide with curiosity. Every day, Maria reminded herself that she was doing this for them, for their future. One afternoon, as Maria walked through the market, she saw a small flyer posted on a bulletin board. It was a scholarship opportunity for young girls in the area, offering a chance for them to attend school and learn. Maria's heart skipped a beat. It was the break they needed. She quickly walked home, her heart pounding in her chest. When she reached the room, she found Emily and Olivia sitting on the floor, reading their books. They looked up as she entered, their faces lighting up with excitement. "I found something today," Maria said, her voice trembling. "You both have a chance to go to school, to have a future. We can make this work." Tears filled her eyes as she hugged them both tightly. It wasn't much, but it was everything. For the first time in months, Maria allowed herself to hope again. The road ahead would be difficult, but she knew they could make it. Together, they would fight for a better life. And this was their first step toward it. Years passed, and Maria's sacrifices slowly began to bear fruit. Her daughters, Emily and Olivia, were now 10 years old. They were no longer the fragile infants she had carried in her arms, but strong, intelligent young girls who were eager to learn. They had grown into their own, each with their unique personality and a shared determination to rise above their circumstances. The small, run-down apartment they called home had never been more alive. Laughter echoed through the cracked walls, a sound that Maria had come to cherish. Her daughters were everything to her, and every moment with them felt like a precious victory. Despite the hardships they faced, the girls excelled in school. They were naturally gifted, and Maria's relentless support gave them the foundation they needed to succeed. They studied late into the night, reading books by the dim light of a flickering candle, their faces filled with determination and a hunger for knowledge. Maria worked long hours, doing laundry for the neighbors, cleaning houses and picking up any odd job she could find. There were days when she came home exhausted, her hands sore from scrubbing. But when she saw the girls' eager faces waiting for her, everything seemed worth it. She never complained, never stopped, because she knew that every sacrifice she made was for them. But as the girls grew older, Maria's dreams for them began to take shape. She had given up everything, her home, her pride, and her own happiness, all for their future. And now she could see that future beginning to unfold before her eyes. One day, Maria received a letter in the mail. It was an invitation for Emily and Olivia to attend an exclusive scholarship program for gifted students. The letter spoke of opportunities for a brighter future, a future Maria had only dreamed of for them. Her heart soared with joy. This was it. This was the moment she had worked so hard for, the chance her daughters needed to break free from the cycle of poverty that had bound their family for so long. With trembling hands, Maria read the letter aloud to her daughters, who gasped in disbelief. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope. The girls jumped up, hugging her tightly, their excitement palpable. Maria smiled through her tears, knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. But there was still much to do. The scholarship was only the first step. The road ahead would be long and full of challenges, but Maria knew that with her daughters by her side they could overcome anything. She had given up her past, her comfort, and her peace of mind for this moment, and she would never stop fighting for their future. Maria sat at the small wooden table in the corner of their tiny, dimly lit apartment, staring at the worn-out envelope in her hands. It had been months since she'd last received any good news, but as she slowly peeled open the envelope, a faint sense of anticipation filled her chest. She had to squint at the small print, the words barely visible in the low light, but when she read them, everything stopped. The letter was from a prestigious scholarship program offering gifted students from disadvantaged backgrounds the chance to receive a quality education. Maria could hardly believe it. She read the words again to make sure she wasn't dreaming. The program was a chance for Emily and Olivia to attend school. Not just any school, but one that would give them a future beyond the small town and the broken-down apartment they called home. It was the opportunity Maria had always wished for her daughters, the very future she had given up everything to provide. Her heart raced as she stood up, the paper still trembling in her hands. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or shout out in joy. She turned toward the bedroom where Emily and Olivia were playing, their laughter filling the room like the sound of music to Maria's ears. They were the reason she had been fighting for so long. The reason she had sacrificed everything. "Emily, Olivia!" Maria called, her voice trembling with excitement. The two girls looked up, their faces lighting up as they rushed toward her. "What is it, Mama?" Olivia asked, her wide eyes full of curiosity. Maria smiled, holding out the letter with both hands, her voice almost breaking with emotion. "You both have a chance. You're invited to a scholarship program. You can go to school, real school. They've accepted you." The girls stood frozen, their eyes scanning the letter, trying to understand the significance of what Maria was saying. They had heard stories about faraway schools, where children learned to read and write, where they could dream of a life beyond the small neighborhood they had grown up in. But to them, it had always seemed impossible. "I don't know how this is happening, but we have a chance. This is your future," Maria continued, her voice full of pride. "All those nights we spent reading together, all the hard work I've done, it's all for this, for you to have a chance at something better." The room fell silent for a moment as Emily and Olivia processed the news. Then, without warning, both girls ran to Maria, throwing their arms around her in a tight hug. "We're going to school, Mama," Emily exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. Maria held them tightly, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the weight of relief, of joy, of the promise she had made to herself and her daughters. She had always told them that no matter what, they would have a better life. And now, it was finally becoming a reality. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Maria worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was in place for Emily and Olivia to attend school. She had never imagined that her daughters would have the opportunity to learn in a place where they would be nurtured, encouraged, and given every chance to succeed. She found a way to buy them new uniforms, books, and school supplies, even though every cent she had earned was stretched to its breaking point. Every evening, after a long day of work, Maria would sit down with her daughters, helping them study, teaching them what little she knew, and encouraging them to aim higher. Emily and Olivia were eager to learn, and their hunger for knowledge filled Maria with a sense of pride. She had dreamed of this moment, but now, seeing it unfold before her eyes, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It wasn't just about providing a roof over their heads anymore. It was about giving them a chance to live the life they deserved. For the first time in a long time, Maria allowed herself to rest. She still had to work hard, still had to fight for every opportunity, but seeing her daughters excited about their future brought a peace to her heart that she hadn't felt in years. The scholarship program wasn't easy. Every day was a new challenge. The girls had to adjust to a new environment, a new routine, and new expectations. But they didn't back down. They were determined to succeed, just like their mother. Maria's sacrifices had led them to this moment, and they were going to make the most of it. But despite their best efforts, there were still moments of doubt. Emily, the more reserved of the two, often struggled with self-confidence. She was intelligent, but she had doubts about her abilities. Olivia, on the other hand, was more outgoing, but her exuberance sometimes got in the way of her studies. Maria worked with them every night, reinforcing their lessons, encouraging them to keep pushing forward, even when they felt discouraged. Maria also faced her own challenges. She had to balance the responsibilities of supporting her family with her desire to see her daughters succeed. There were days when she felt like she couldn't do it anymore, when the exhaustion from working long hours would weigh heavily on her shoulders. But every time she saw Emily and Olivia's bright faces, every time they told her about something they had learned at school, Maria found the strength to keep going. She had sacrificed so much for them, and now they were flourishing. Every achievement they made felt like a victory for Maria too, a reflection of everything she had given up to give them this chance. Months passed, and as the girls settled into their new school, they began to show their true potential. Emily, who had once struggled with her self-esteem, began to excel in her studies. Olivia, with her natural charisma, became popular among her peers and began to take on leadership roles in class. Maria watched from the sidelines, proud of the young women they were becoming. One day, after receiving an excellent report card, Emily came home with a smile that lit up the entire room. "Mama, I made it! I'm at the top of my class!" she exclaimed, her eyes shining with pride. Maria's heart swelled with pride as she hugged her daughter tightly. "I knew you could do it, Emily. You've always had it in you. You just needed to believe in yourself." As the years went on, Emily and Olivia continued to grow, not just academically, but emotionally and spiritually. They became strong, independent young women, full of ambition and determination. Maria's sacrifices had led them to this point, and now they were building their own futures. Maria watched as they blossomed, and she realized that her fight had been worth every hardship. She had given up everything, her past, her comfort, and her dreams, to create a future for her daughters. And now that future was unfolding before her eyes. She had done it. They had done it. Together. Maria stood in the doorway of their home one evening, watching her daughters study together at the kitchen table. The house was small, but it was filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a bright future. Maria smiled as she thought back to the day she first walked into that small apartment, unsure of how they would survive. Now, as she looked at her daughters, she knew that everything had been worth it. Her sacrifices had shaped their futures, and now nothing could stop them from achieving their dreams. The months that followed Emily and Olivia's first real steps into the world of education were marked by both progress and uncertainty. While the girls excelled, their journey was far from easy. Every day was a battle, not just for knowledge but for survival. Maria worked tirelessly to ensure they didn't just survive but thrived, pushing herself to the limit. But as the days turned into weeks and months, Maria's once unshakable resolve began to falter under the weight of old wounds and unresolved conflicts. Maria's sacrifices had come at a great cost. Her health had been deteriorating slowly. Years of neglecting her own well-being while focusing on the future of her children were starting to catch up with her. She had kept going, driven by the promise she'd made to herself and to her daughters. But deep down, she knew something had to change. It was on a cold afternoon, when the wind seemed to bite through the cracks in their tiny apartment, that Maria's past came back to haunt her. She was sitting in the small living room, folding laundry, when the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat. It had been years since she had heard from him. Daniel, her ex-husband, the man who had betrayed her, abandoned her, and left her with nothing. At first, Maria hesitated. She had spent so long building a life without him, a life where she could stand on her own 2 feet. Why would he come back now? Her mind raced, filled with doubt and uncertainty. The person who had walked out on her when she needed him the most, the one who had left her with nothing but the weight of his absence. Why would he suddenly want to return? But when she opened the door, there he was, older, worn, but unmistakably Daniel. His face was lined with regret, and his eyes were heavy with something Maria couldn't quite place. For a moment, they both stood there in silence, neither of them knowing what to say. "Maria," he began, his voice shaky. "I know it's been a long time, but I need to talk to you." Maria's heart hardened. The man who had shattered her life, who had left her with no explanation, who had turned his back on her and their children. He was standing in front of her, asking for a chance to explain. "No," Maria replied coldly, her voice steady but filled with years of pain. "You don't get to just show up now, Daniel. Not after everything. Not after you abandoned us." Daniel flinched as if struck, but he pushed forward. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you, Maria. But I need to explain myself. Please, just hear me out." Maria shook her head, turning away from him. She wanted to slam the door in his face, but something in his voice held her back. Her mind flashed back to the night he left, the night she had begged him to stay, the night she had promised him that they would get through the hard times together. That promise had been shattered the moment he walked out. "I'm not interested in your excuses," Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. "You walked away from us. You left us to fend for ourselves. And now, after everything we've been through, you think you can just come back and make it all better? I won't let you do that." Daniel stepped closer, his eyes filled with pain. "I'm not here to make things better. I'm here to apologize. I'm here to say I was wrong. I failed you, Maria. I failed Emily and Olivia, and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I need you to know, I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to abandon you." Maria felt the anger surge in her chest. She wanted to shout at him, to scream at him for the years of pain, the years of raising her daughters alone, the years of struggling to make ends meet. But there was something else there too, something deep within her that wanted closure. She needed to know the truth, needed to understand why he left, why he had abandoned her when she needed him the most. "Why did you leave?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did you walk away from your family?" "From us?" Daniel swallowed hard, his face twisted with regret. "I was scared, Maria. I thought I couldn't do it. I thought I wasn't good enough for you or the girls. I was a coward. I let my fear drive me away." Maria's heart sank. The man who had once promised to love her, to stand by her no matter what, had left because of fear? "You're a coward, Daniel," she said flatly. "You didn't just leave because you were scared. You left because you didn't care enough to try. You didn't care about us." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes, but he didn't speak. Instead, he stepped back, as if to give Maria space. She closed her eyes, feeling a surge of grief and anger rise up in her chest. She had spent so many years wondering what had happened, wondering what had gone wrong. But now, she realized that it didn't matter anymore. She had rebuilt her life without him. She had made sure that her daughters were happy, strong, and successful. She didn't need his apologies. She didn't need him at all. "Goodbye, Daniel," she said, her voice firm, as she slowly closed the door. "It's too late for apologies." You had your chance. The next few days were a blur for Maria. After Daniel's visit, she couldn't shake the feelings of anger and betrayal that had resurfaced. But it wasn't just him who was haunting her. Maria began to question everything. She had spent years fighting for her daughters, making sure they had the opportunities they deserved. But now, with Daniel's appearance, the past felt like it was closing in on her again. And then came the next blow, a letter from the scholarship program. At first, Maria thought it was a confirmation for Emily and Olivia's continued enrollment, but when she opened it, her heart dropped. The program had decided to cut funding for the next year, and Emily and Olivia would no longer be able to continue their education there. The news hit Maria like a ton of bricks. She had worked so hard to get them to this point, and now everything was unraveling. She tried to stay calm, but the tears came anyway. All those years of sacrifice, all those sleepless nights, all for nothing. But Maria knew one thing. She couldn't give up now. Not when her daughters had come so far. She would fight. She would find a way. But the betrayal didn't stop there. Maria learned that the man behind the scholarship program's funding cuts was none other than Daniel's old business partner, the man who had helped him walk away from their family years ago. The same man who had stolen their future. This time, Maria wasn't going to let him win. She was done being passive, done letting others decide her fate. She was ready for revenge. Not for herself, but for Emily and Olivia. They deserved better, and she was going to make sure they got it. Maria's next steps were clear. She would use everything in her power to expose the corruption in the scholarship program. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had already overcome so much. With Emily and Olivia by her side, she would fight for the justice they deserved. As the days passed, Maria and her daughters began gathering evidence, speaking to former employees of the scholarship program, and contacting journalists who could help bring the truth to light. It was a risky move, but Maria wasn't afraid anymore. She would do whatever it took to right the wrongs that had been done to her family. And this time, she wouldn't stop until she had taken back what was rightfully hers. Maria stood before the mirror, her reflection staring back at her with a mixture of determination and exhaustion. The battle she had fought for years, against the odds, against the people who had betrayed her and her family, was about to reach its climax. The time for fighting in silence was over. It was time for justice, not just for herself, but for Emily and Olivia. She looked over at her daughters, who were seated at the kitchen table, their eyes focused on the papers spread out before them. The evidence they had gathered, the testimonies they had obtained, and the support they had managed to rally from the community all pointed to one undeniable truth. The system had failed them, and it was time to expose the truth to the world. "We've come this far," Maria said, her voice firm but tinged with emotion. "We're not backing down now. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about showing everyone that we can fight back, that we can take back what's been stolen from us." Emily and Olivia nodded in unison. They had grown up fast, far faster than most children their age, but this was their fight too. They had seen their mother sacrifice everything for them, and now they would stand beside her, no longer as the little girls who needed to be protected, but as the strong, capable young women they had become. "We're ready, Mama," Olivia said quietly, her voice steady. "We're in this together. We've got this." Maria smiled at her daughters, pride swelling in her chest. She had never been prouder of them. They had inherited her strength, her resilience, and her unyielding belief in justice. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. As they left the house, the weight of their mission hung heavy in the air. But Maria felt a sense of peace. She was no longer running from the past. She was confronting it head-on. And with Emily and Olivia by her side, she knew that no matter what happened next, they had already won. Maria sat in the dimly lit kitchen, her hands trembling as she held the letter that had just arrived. The scholarship program had confirmed their decision. They had indeed decided to cancel the funding for the next year. The news hit her hard, but she had known it was coming. The letter had been signed by Daniel's old business partner, the same man who had stood by while they destroyed her life. The words on the page burned her like a cold fire. But this time, Maria was no longer the woman who would stay silent. This time, she was determined to fight back. Her heart raced as she gathered herself. She needed to act fast. She couldn't let this injustice stand. The program had already turned its back on them, but Maria knew she couldn't back down. It was time to take matters into her own hands. She could feel the weight of the years of struggle on her shoulders, the memories of all the sacrifices she had made for Emily and Olivia, the relentless hours of work, the tears, the pain. She had done all of this for them, and she wouldn't let it go to waste now. "Emily! Olivia!" Maria called, her voice filled with determination. Her daughters, who had been studying in the next room, immediately rushed to her side. Maria looked at them, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and fire. "We're not giving up," Maria said, her voice unwavering. "I'm going to make sure we fight for our future. We've come too far to let it slip away now." Olivia looked at her mother, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean, Mama?" Maria held up the letter, the words practically searing her fingers. "They've canceled the funding for your scholarship, but we're not going to let that happen. We're going to expose the truth. We're going to take them to court if we have to. We can't let them get away with this." Emily, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. "But Mama, we don't have enough resources to take them to court. We don't even know how to start." Maria's expression softened as she looked at her daughter. "We've been through worse, haven't we? We've fought our way through the darkest of times, and we've come out on top. This is no different. I'll do whatever it takes to get you the education you deserve." Olivia stepped forward as well, determination replacing the confusion in her eyes. "We're with you, Mama. We'll fight this together." Maria nodded, her heart swelling with pride. She had raised two strong, capable young women who weren't afraid to stand up for what was right. She had always believed in them, even when the world seemed to be against them. Now, they were ready to take on the world together. Maria knew that she couldn't do it alone. She needed help. The first thing she did was reach out to a lawyer she knew from the local community. His name was Henry Barnes, and he had helped many people in the past. Maria had always trusted him, but now she was hoping that he would be able to help her in a way that would change everything. The next day, she met with Henry at his office. The small, cluttered room was lined with bookshelves filled with legal texts and case files. Henry was sitting behind a wooden desk, his glasses perched on the edge of his nose as he looked up at her. "Maria," he said, his voice gentle but serious, "I'm glad you came to me. I know this isn't easy for you, but you're doing the right thing. We can fight this, and we will." Maria sat across from him, her hands still trembling, but her resolve firm. "I need to make them pay, Henry. I can't let them take everything we've worked for." Henry nodded, flipping through some paperwork on his desk. "We'll gather the evidence, start building our case. But Maria, you have to understand that this is going to take time. The legal system moves slowly, and the people we're up against have a lot of power." Maria didn't care. She had spent too many years waiting for the world to change on its own. Now, she was going to make it happen. "I don't care how long it takes. I've waited long enough." Henry sighed and leaned back in his chair. "All right. We'll do it your way. But remember, you're not in this alone. You have me, and you have your daughters." Maria smiled. "I know. And that's all I need." The first step in the battle was to gather as much information as possible. Maria, Emily, and Olivia spent countless hours sifting through documents, searching for anything that would help expose the corruption behind the scholarship program. They went through old records, speaking with former employees who had worked for the program, and trying to track down any evidence that would lead them to the truth. One evening, Emily came running into the living room, holding a folder of papers in her hands. "Mama, I found something!" she exclaimed. Maria jumped up, her heart racing. She had been waiting for this moment, the moment when they finally found the smoking gun. Emily spread the papers out on the table. "It's a letter from Daniel's business partner, the one who's in charge of the program's funding. He's been involved in shady dealings for years. Look, it's all right here." Maria's hands shook as she read the letter. It was from the very man who had betrayed her all those years ago, the one who had taken everything from her and her daughters. The letter detailed the ways in which he had manipulated the program for personal gain, using his influence to control the funding and to keep the most deserving students from receiving the help they needed. This was it. This was the evidence they needed. With the evidence in hand, Maria, Emily, and Olivia went back to Henry. The lawyer was shocked by what they had found, but he was also impressed. He had no idea how deep the corruption ran, but now he knew they had a chance. Together, they began preparing their case. They met with journalists, reaching out to anyone who would listen to their story. They spoke to former employees who had been silenced by the system, gathering testimonials from people who had seen firsthand how the program had been manipulated. The media caught wind of the case, and soon Maria's fight for justice became a public spectacle. Reporters camped outside her apartment, eager to interview her and her daughters. As the story spread, people began to rally behind them, supporting their efforts to expose the corruption that had been hidden for so long. But Maria knew the battle was far from over. The people behind the program had power, and they wouldn't give up easily. But Maria wasn't afraid. She had been through the worst of it. Now she was ready to face whatever came next. After months of preparation, the day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and curious onlookers. Maria, Emily, and Olivia sat together in the front row, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had fought so hard for this moment, and now it was time to see it through. As the trial began, Maria listened to the arguments being made, her mind focused and sharp. She had come so far, and she wasn't going to let anything or anyone stand in her way. When it was finally her turn to speak, Maria stood up, her voice steady as she addressed the court. "I've spent my whole life fighting for what's right. I've raised my daughters in the face of adversity, and I've done everything I can to give them a future. But now, I'm here to fight for them, and for every student who's been denied a chance at success because of corruption and greed." The courtroom was silent as Maria spoke, her words carrying the weight of years of pain, sacrifice, and strength. When she finished, she sat down, her heart pounding in her chest. She had said what needed to be said, and now it was up to the court to deliver justice. After what felt like an eternity, the judge returned with the verdict. Maria held her breath, praying for justice. The judge cleared his throat and looked at the courtroom. After reviewing the evidence, it is clear that the scholarship program was manipulated by those in power for personal gain, the judge said. Daniel Williams and his business partner, Robert Montgomery, will be held accountable for their actions. The funding for the scholarship program will be reinstated, and a full investigation will take place to ensure that this type of corruption never happens again. Maria's heart soared. This was it. They had won. After everything, after all the sacrifices, the pain, and the struggle, justice had been served. In the months that followed, Maria and her daughters were celebrated for their bravery and resilience. The scholarship program was restored, and new measures were put in place to ensure that no student would ever be denied the opportunity they deserved because of corruption. As for Maria, she finally felt like the weight of the past had been lifted from her shoulders. She had fought for her daughters, and they had won. The future was brighter than ever, and for the first time in a long time, Maria allowed herself to dream again. Maria sat at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea in her hands, her fingers wrapped tightly around the ceramic mug. She stared out the window, the sun shining brightly over the city, casting its light on the new life she and her daughters were building. The events of the past year seemed like a dream, a distant memory that now felt like something that had happened to someone else. She had spent so many years carrying the weight of her past, her mistakes, her fears, and her sacrifices. But now, that weight was finally lifting. The victory in court had been more than just a win against those who had betrayed her. It was a win for every mother who had fought for her children, for every person who had been wronged by a system that didn't care. Emily and Olivia were still at school, their futures brighter than ever before. They had both been accepted into top universities, their scholarships reinstated, and their dreams finally within reach. Maria couldn't be prouder of them. They had grown into strong, independent young women who were ready to take on the world. But as she sat there, she knew that the battle wasn't truly over. The victory in court had been sweet, but the aftermath was proving to be more complicated than she had anticipated. The world was changing, and so were they. Maria had always believed that once they had justice, everything would fall into place. But the reality was that healing wasn't as simple as just winning a legal battle. As the weeks went by, Maria began to notice a shift in the household dynamic. It wasn't obvious at first, just small things, like the way Emily and Olivia were talking less at the dinner table, or the occasional silence that filled the house when they would have once been laughing together. Maria brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the pressure of school and the adjustments they were all making after the trial. But as the days turned into weeks, the tension became harder to ignore. One evening, after a long day of work, Maria returned home to find Emily and Olivia sitting in the living room, their eyes focused on their phones. The room was unusually quiet, and Maria could feel the weight of something unsaid between them. She sat down beside them, her heart heavy with the sense that something was wrong. "Girls," Maria began, her voice soft. "What's going on? Why have you both been so quiet lately? I know things have been hard, but we're through the worst of it now. I thought we were all in this together." Olivia, the more outspoken of the two, looked up from her phone. "It's not that, Mama," she said, her voice strained. "It's just, well, everything's changed, hasn't it? We've won, but I don't feel like we've really won. I don't know what's next." Maria's heart sank as she listened to her daughter's words. She knew Olivia had always been the more carefree one, the one who had always approached life with an unshakable confidence. But now there was doubt in her voice, something Maria hadn't heard before. "What do you mean by that, Olivia?" Maria asked, her voice filled with concern. "I don't know," Olivia replied, her eyes welling with tears. "We fought for so long, and now that we've won, it feels like there's nothing left. Everything we've worked for feels empty. I don't know where I fit in anymore." Emily, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "I feel the same way, Mama. I don't know if it's because everything changed so fast, or if it's just the pressure of everything being so perfect now. I used to think that when we got to this point, everything would be different. But now, it feels like we're just waiting for something to happen." Maria sat back in her chair, the weight of their words settling heavily on her shoulders. She had always believed that the victory would bring peace, that once they had justice, their lives would be whole again. But now, as she looked at her daughters, she saw the toll the battle had taken on them, even after the dust had settled. "I know things feel uncertain," Maria said, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and understanding. "But what I've learned is that the fight never truly ends. We've fought for a future, but that future isn't handed to us all at once. We have to keep working, keep pushing forward. There will always be obstacles, but as long as we have each other, we'll be okay." The girls nodded, but the sadness in their eyes lingered. Maria could see the struggle they were facing, the realization that winning the battle for their future didn't automatically mean the battle for happiness was over. She understood now that their journey wasn't just about achieving their dreams, but about finding a way to hold on to the love and connection that had carried them this far. As the days passed, Maria found herself revisiting the past more often. Despite the victory, the shadow of Daniel and his betrayal still loomed over her, haunting her at the most unexpected moments. She had spent so many years trying to forget him, trying to move on. But now that her life was finally beginning to stabilize, the past was resurfacing in ways she hadn't anticipated. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table, Maria received a phone call. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it made her uneasy. She answered, her heart pounding in her chest. "Maria," the voice on the other end said. "It's Daniel." Maria's breath caught in her throat. It had been years since she had heard his voice. He had disappeared from her life after the trial, and she had hoped that it would stay that way. But now, here he was, calling her again. She felt a wave of anger and fear surge through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What do you want, Daniel?" Maria asked, her voice cold. "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but I need to see you," Daniel said, his voice filled with regret. "I need to apologize for everything, for what I did to you, to the girls. I know it's too late, but I need to tell you how sorry I am." Maria felt a rush of emotions flooding her heart. She had spent so long pushing Daniel out of her mind, but now, hearing his voice again brought back everything. The pain, the anger, and the memories of the life they once shared. "I don't want to hear it, Daniel," Maria said firmly. "You had your chance, and you threw it away. I'm not interested in hearing your apologies now. You made your choice when you walked away from us." But even as she said the words, a part of her longed for closure, for the chance to finally understand why he had left them. She knew it was a trap, but the curiosity was too strong to ignore. "When and where do you want to meet?" Maria asked, her voice betraying her own inner conflict. "I'll be at the park near the old cafe at 5 p.m. tomorrow," Daniel said, his voice barely a whisper. "Please, Maria, I just want a chance to make things right." Maria hung up the phone without saying another word. Her heart was racing. She had promised herself that she would never look back, that she would never let Daniel back into her life. But now, the past was calling her again, pulling her in. She didn't know what would come of the meeting, but she knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened, she would walk away with the truth, even if it was the last thing she ever did. The next day, Maria found herself standing at the park, the same park where she and Daniel had once spent lazy afternoons together. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of children playing echoed in the distance. She stood there for a long time, waiting for him to show up, her heart heavy with anticipation. When Daniel finally appeared, he looked older, more worn than she remembered. His once confident posture was now hunched, and the man who had once been her partner in life now seemed like a shadow of the person she had known. He approached her slowly, his eyes filled with regret. "Maria," he said softly, "I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to abandon you. I was scared, but that's no excuse for what I did." Maria looked at him, her gaze hardening. "You didn't just leave me, Daniel. You left us. You left Emily and Olivia. You abandoned your family, and for what? Because you were scared? That's not good enough. You didn't just break my heart. You broke theirs too." Daniel's eyes welled with tears. "I know," he whispered, "and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I'm asking for your forgiveness, Maria. Not for me, but for them. For your daughters. They deserve to know the truth." Maria paused, the weight of his words sinking in. The anger, the resentment, and the pain were still there, but so was something else. The need to finally close this chapter of her life. "You'll never be forgiven for what you did, Daniel," Maria said, her voice steady. "But that doesn't mean I won't give my daughters the chance to decide for themselves. They deserve the truth, not just from me, but from you." Daniel nodded, his face etched with regret. "I understand. I failed you both, but I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. For them." As Maria walked away from the park, she felt a sense of closure that she hadn't felt in years. She had faced her past, and now she could finally move forward. The truth was out, and while the pain of what had happened would never completely disappear, Maria knew that she had done everything she could for her daughters. They had fought for their future, and now they would create it together. Maria smiled softly, the weight of the past finally lifting. With Emily and Olivia by her side, the future was theirs to build. Maria's heart was finally beginning to heal, though the scars would always remain. The years of sacrifice, of pushing through hardship, had taken their toll. But now, there was a new sense of possibility in her life. Emily and Olivia were thriving in ways she had always dreamed, and despite the chaos of the past, they were still a family, stronger than ever. But just when Maria thought they could finally take a breath and enjoy the peace they had fought so hard for, the world had other plans. It was early spring, and the scent of new beginnings filled the air. The house, once dark and cramped, now had a lightness to it, as though the walls themselves had exhaled. Maria found herself sitting on the porch, watching her daughters play in the yard, their laughter ringing through the air. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to simply enjoy the moment, to feel proud of how far they had come. But then, the phone rang. It was a call from Henry Barnes, the lawyer who had helped them with the case against Daniel and the scholarship program. Maria picked up the phone, not expecting anything extraordinary. "Hello? Maria, we need to talk." Henry's voice was serious, but there was an undercurrent of excitement in his tone. Maria sat up straighter, her heart skipping a beat. "What's going on?" "Is everything okay?" "It's more than okay," Henry replied. "It's about the scholarship program. The media's coverage of the case has caused a huge stir, and we've got the attention of some very influential people." Maria felt a wave of confusion. "What do you mean? What's happening?" "You won't believe this," Henry continued, "but several philanthropists have come forward. They've seen the injustice that was done to your family and want to help. They want to create a new initiative, a foundation, that will ensure no other students are left behind because of corruption." Maria's mouth went dry. "You're saying this is real?" "It's very real," Henry confirmed. "They want you to be involved, Maria. They want you to lead the foundation." Maria sat in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in. After everything they had been through, this was an opportunity that had never even crossed her mind. She had spent so long fighting for her daughter's future, but now there was a chance to change the future of countless other children, too. I don't know what to say," Maria murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to say anything just yet," Henry said. "But this could be the opportunity of a lifetime. You and your daughters have become symbols of resilience and justice. These people want to invest in you, invest in what you can do for others." As Maria listened to Henry explain the details, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about creating a lasting change, something that would extend beyond her own family. She knew deep in her heart that this was her chance to make a difference on a larger scale. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and decisions. Maria, Emily, and Olivia were now the faces of a movement that was much larger than their small family. The foundation that was being built wasn't just about providing scholarships. It was about ensuring that every child, no matter their background, had access to quality education. It was about dismantling the systems that had kept so many children from succeeding. And it was about creating a future where Maria's story of struggle, resilience, and ultimate triumph wasn't the exception, but the rule. Maria sat down with the philanthropists, a group of influential individuals from various sectors, including education, law, and business. They were eager to meet her, to hear her story, and to see how she could help shape the future of their initiative. "I want this foundation to be about more than just education," Maria told them during one of their first meetings. "I want it to be about breaking barriers. I want it to be about giving children the tools they need not just to survive, but to thrive. I want to give them the confidence to dream bigger than they ever thought possible." The room was silent for a moment as her words hung in the air. Then, one of the philanthropists, a woman named Claire, spoke up. "Maria, you've already shown us what you're capable of. You fought for your daughters, and you've shown the world what it means to stand up for what's right. We believe in you." And with that, the vision was born. Maria and her daughters, with the support of the foundation's backers, began working tirelessly to put their plan into action. They held meetings with schools, with educators, with communities, and with anyone who was willing to listen. The foundation would not just be about scholarships. It would also provide mentorship, career development, and emotional support for students who were facing the same kinds of challenges that Maria and her daughters had faced. Olivia and Emily, now young women on the cusp of their own futures, were eager to get involved. Emily, who had always dreamed of becoming a lawyer, began working on the legal aspects of the foundation, helping to draft contracts and agreements. Olivia, with her natural charisma and passion for helping others, became the face of the foundation, traveling around to speak at schools and community events, inspiring young people to believe in their own potential. Maria, however, was the heart of the operation. She met with donors, strategized with partners, and worked endlessly to ensure that the foundation would be a success. She knew that this was her true calling, not just as a mother, but as a leader. She wasn't just fighting for her daughters anymore. She was fighting for every child who had been denied the opportunities she had fought so hard to give her own. Months later, the foundation was officially launched. The first round of scholarships was awarded, and it was a moment of celebration for everyone involved. Maria stood at the podium, her heart swelling with pride, as she watched the young students step up to receive their scholarships. Some of them came from families who had never been able to afford education. Others had been denied the chance because of their background or financial situation, but now they were getting the opportunity to chase their dreams. As Maria looked out over the crowd, she couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. The work they had started was already making a difference, and as the foundation continued to grow, so would the impact they had on the world. "I stand here today not as a mother who has fought for her daughters," Maria said in her speech, "but as someone who believes that every child has the right to succeed. We've built something powerful together, something that will outlast any of us, and this is just the beginning." The crowd erupted into applause, and Maria felt the weight of the years of hardship, the pain, and the struggle lift from her shoulders. She had done it. She had not only given her daughters a future, but she had given countless others the chance to have their own. As the ceremony came to an end, Maria found her daughters by her side. Emily and Olivia were smiling, their eyes bright with the excitement of the future. "You did it, Mama," Olivia said, her voice full of pride. "You made this happen." Maria smiled and pulled her daughters close. "No," she said softly. "We made this happen, all of us, together." And for the first time in a long time, Maria felt peace. She had done it. She had created a future where her daughters, and so many others, could dream and succeed. The pain of the past no longer had a hold on her. She had built a future, not just for her family, but for a community of children who would now have the same opportunities she had fought so hard to give her own. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But Maria knew that with her daughters by her side and with the support of the foundation, they could face anything. They had come so far, and now there was nothing they couldn't do. As the foundation grew, so did the impact of Maria's vision. What had once been a small, personal battle to secure a better life for her daughters had now blossomed into a nationwide movement. Her name and the names of Emily and Olivia were no longer just symbols of hardship and sacrifice. They had become synonymous with resilience, empowerment, and the power of community action. The foundation had expanded its reach to cities across the country, providing scholarships, mentorship, and career pathways to thousands of underprivileged students. Local schools began to incorporate the foundation's programs into their curricula, ensuring that children from all walks of life had access to quality education, no matter their financial situation. Maria, with her daughters by her side, had become a beacon of hope for those who once thought that the doors to success were closed to them. But the true reward for Maria, the one thing that mattered most, was the transformation she saw in the eyes of the students who had been granted the chance to live their dreams. When she visited the classrooms, when she heard the stories of those who had come through the foundation, Maria realized that the legacy she was building wasn't just about providing financial assistance. It was about changing lives. It was about changing mindsets. At the center of this transformation were Emily and Olivia. Both young women had grown into exceptional leaders in their own right. Emily, now a practicing lawyer, had used her legal expertise to fight for educational equity, while Olivia had become a motivational speaker, traveling the country and sharing her story of overcoming obstacles and finding success against the odds. Together, they had built the foundation into something far more significant than any of them could have imagined. It had been a few years since the foundation had been launched, and Maria stood once again at a podium. But this time, it wasn't her daughters who were in the spotlight. It was the students, young men and women who were now preparing to embark on their own journeys. This was the foundation's largest graduation ceremony yet, and Maria couldn't help but feel a wave of pride wash over her. The room was filled with graduates, their faces glowing with excitement, some with tears of joy in their eyes. Their families were there, beaming with pride, knowing that this moment represented not just a personal achievement, but the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. For many of these students, their dreams had once seemed unattainable, but through the foundation's support, they had made it. Maria looked out at the crowd, her heart swelling with emotion. She saw the faces of students she had mentored personally and the lives they had transformed, and she realized that this was the culmination of everything she had fought for: her daughter's future, the students' futures, and the future of education in this country. As the ceremony ended and the graduates stood together, their caps raised high, Maria felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Emily and Olivia standing beside her, both wearing proud smiles. "Mama," Emily said softly, her voice filled with admiration. "You did it. You gave us a future, and now you've given a future to all of them." Maria smiled, her eyes wet with tears. "No, we did it. All of us. You and Olivia have made this journey worthwhile. You've become everything I ever dreamed of." Olivia stepped forward and embraced her mother. "Mama, you are the true inspiration. You didn't just teach us how to succeed. You showed us how to give back." Maria held them both close. For the first time in many years, she felt complete. This moment wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for every person who had ever been told that their dreams were impossible, for every person who had been told they weren't enough. "I couldn't have done it without you," Maria whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "And I wouldn't change a thing." The legacy of the foundation continued to grow, reaching more and more communities every day. But for Maria, the true legacy was something much deeper. It was in the lessons she had imparted to her daughters, the way they had taken what she had taught them and passed it on to others. It was in the lives they had touched, and the students who were now standing tall, ready to take on the world. As the years went by, Maria found herself spending more time with her daughters, watching them both flourish in their careers and their personal lives. Emily and Olivia, now both established in their respective fields, had started families of their own, ensuring that the values Maria had instilled in them would live on for generations. Maria knew that her work was far from over. There was still so much more to do, so many more children to reach. But as she looked at her daughters, at the incredible women they had become, she knew that the foundation she had built was not just her legacy. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of love, resilience, and the unwavering belief that every child deserves a chance to succeed. In the final moments of Maria's reflection, she realized that the true measure of success was not in the numbers, how many scholarships had been granted or how many lives had been changed, but in the ripple effect of their work. Every student who had been helped, every child who had been given the tools to change their circumstances, had now become a part of the legacy that Maria, Emily, and Olivia had created. The success of the foundation was the beginning of a cycle, one that would continue to give back and inspire future generations. Maria had always wanted to make a difference, and now she knew that she had. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Maria sat with her family by her side, knowing that their journey was only just beginning. Their story of hardship, resilience, and ultimate triumph would live on in the hearts of those they had helped. And through them, Maria knew that the future would always be brighter. As Maria sat back and watched her daughters, now grown and thriving, she realized that everything she had fought for had been worth it. The road had been long and filled with challenges, but it had led to a place of peace, fulfillment, and hope. She had not only changed the course of her daughters' lives, but also paved the way for countless others to follow in their footsteps. The foundation she had built had become a symbol of resilience, love, and the belief that no dream is too big to achieve. Maria smiled as she watched Emily and Olivia working side by side in the foundation, mentoring young students just like they once were. It was a full circle moment. Her past struggles had led to this beautiful future of giving back. As she looked around, she couldn't help but feel grateful for every sacrifice, every tear, and every victory that had brought them to this point. Now, as the family had come together, standing strong and united, Maria knew this was just the beginning. They were creating a legacy that would live on, inspiring generations to come, and changing lives in ways they never thought possible. So, what do you think about Maria's incredible journey? Was her fight for her daughter's future inspiring to you? Do you believe that even after the hardest battles, there is always hope for a new beginning? Let us know in the comments below. Rate this story from 1 to 10. If you loved the story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more inspiring content like this. And remember to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more amazing stories.